Now, we're up to the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis, but I do want to backtrack for a moment to a certain sheet of Rashi in the last sugi that we did yesterday, because Tosfos has a different girsa. According to the girsa that Rashi has, which is our girsa, Hacha Tziruf D'Rabbanan. Those are the last 4 words before the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis. And it means that since, in this case of those slabs of metal, even if he were to have kavana, l'shem tziruf, he would not be violating makav upatish d'oraisa, and it would only be tziruf d'Rabbanan, because you're not dealing with a kli. These slabs of metal do not have a receptacle. And since we have a situation here of a davar she'eino miskaven, then the gzeira d'Rabbanan of tziruf doesn't kick in. So let's understand. Tziruf d'oraisa would be in the manufacture of a receptacle, of a kli, and then he puts it after he heats it into cold water. That's a d'oraisa. The Rabbanan prohibited, even in a case of slabs of metal, which is not a kli. You're not allowed to heat it up and then put it into cold water. That's tziruf d'Rabbanan. However, the difference between the two is davar she'eino miskaven. When he's heating up the slabs on Erev Yom Kippur for the purpose of reducing the coldness of the mikveh by throwing these hot slabs into the cold water, that's a davar she'eino miskaven. He has no kavanah whatsoever for tziruf. If it would have been doraisa, meaning if it would have been a kli, then Abaye paskins like Rabbi Yehuda that davar she'eino miskaven is chayav. But since we're dealing with a case of tziruf d'Rabbanan, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees vis-a-vis tziruf d'Rabbanan that we're talking about a davar she'eino miskaven, which is mutar. So Rabbi Yehuda will accept the application of davar she'eino miskaven not in a malacha d'oraisa, but in a case of a gzeira d'Rabbanan, like the case of tziruf in this case of the slabs of metal, ashoshiyos. However, Tosfos quotes a different girsa that you'll see in Tosfos Dibra Maschil Hani, which is one of the longest Tosfos, if not the longest Tosfos in Shas. But his girsa in our Gemara is Hani b'Luchol HaTorah Kula Aval Hacha Tziruf D'Rabbanan Hu V'Ein Shvus B'Migdash. We don't have those last 3 words V'Ein Shvus B'Migdash in our girsa. And the Balei Tosfos, the Ri, explains the Gemara according to this girsa that Abaye understood that according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that davar she'eino miskaven is asur, that Isur of Rabbi Yehuda, of a davar she'eino miskaven, is only d'Rabbanan. And therefore, in the case of hatolas ashachios into the mikvah on Yom Kippur, if he doesn't have kavanah for tziruf, this, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, even if I would grant you that tziruf here is a malacha d'oraisa, would not incur a chiv d'oraisa because he is eino miskaven. And the eino miskaven, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, reduces the isur from a d'oraisa down to a d'Rabbanan, such that now we can apply the principle of ein shvus b'migdash. And the obvious question is, what are you talking about? Rabbi Yehuda holds that davar she'eino miskaven is asur d'oraisa, and I'll prove it to you. We have the brisa of Rabbi Oshia right here with regard to ktzitzas by Heres b'makom mila, and Rav Ashi insists that the only reason he's allowed to do this Mila on Yom HaShmini in a case of Aheres is because of the Pasuk Besar or Loso. In the absence of Besar or Loso, we would not override the Isser of Ketzitzas Baheres. Now, wait a second. He's not miskavin here for Ketzitzas Baheres. His kavana is for the purpose of Mila. So we have here a Davar She'ena miskavin. And Abai already told us that the reason why we need a apostle to be matir Mila b'makom tzaras is because we are reflecting the Shita here. Rav Moshe is reflecting the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda that Davar She'ena miskavin is awesome. Obviously, we talk about an Isa Doraisa because we're saying that Mila, if not for the special passing of Besara also, would not override the Isser of Ketzitzas Baheres in this situation where he's an Edom Miskavin. So it must be, therefore, that we're dealing with an Isa Doraisa, even though it's Edom Miskavin. How can Tosfos therefore say that in the case of Tziruv, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that since it's Eno Miskavin, it reduces it from a Doraisa to Rabbanan. In Ketzitzas Baheres, we said that even though he's not Miskavin to Ketzitzas Baheres, he's violating an Isa Doraisa. And Davar She'ena Miskavin is Asur Min HaTorah. Again, we'll allow Mila only because of the special Xeris HaKosim, the derivation of the Yalfusa from Sarah Losa. But in the absence of that Yalfusa, it would be Asur. You cannot override the Isa Ketzitzas Baheres even for the great mitzvah of Mila, Shenichrusu Aleh Yud Gimel Brisos. Because despite the fact that he's not miskavin to Ketzitzas Baheres, that is a violation of an Isa Doraisa. How then can Tosfos, according to his Girsa, justify that Tziruv would only be a violation of a Derabanan in a case of Eno Miskavin? Had he had Kavanah for Tziruv, that would be a Malacha Doraisa, and that would not lend itself to a heter of Shvus Be'ein Shvus Be'bigam. But what gives it the lower grade status of the Shvus is the fact that he's Eno Miskavin. And we're going according to Rabbi Yehuda. We just finished establishing that according to Abaye, who accepts Rabbi Yehuda, Davar She'ena Miskavin is also in the Raisa. How can Tosfos reduce it to a Drabon? And here we have what I call a classic Brisker lumnus. And that is what we call Din Misuya, as opposed to Din Kloli. In the Din Kloli, the general rule of Davar She'ena Miskavin, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we're dealing with an Isa Doraisa despite the lack of Kavanah. But in Shabbos, we're dealing with an Isa Drabana because Shabbos is a Din Misuyam. It's not a Din Kloli. And Davar She'ena Miskavin in Hilchas Melecha Shabbos accomplishes a unique goal. And even according to Rabbi Yehuda, reduces the Isser Malacha from a Doraisa to a Rabbanan. Why? Says Tosfos, because Meleches Machsheves Osra Torah. What makes Shabbos unique is that the Torah prohibits a Meleches Machsheves, which we derive from the Mishkan. And all the dinim of Malacha and the definitions thereof in Shabbos are derived from Mishkan. And Mishkan was, as the Torah says it over and over again in Sefer Shmos, a Meleches Machshavos. This Davar She'ena Miskavin, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, is going to apply to Meleches Shabbos because we have the unique condition or stipulation that Meleches Shabbos must be a Meleches Machshavos. Meleches Machshavos means, at this particular context, that he has a machshava and he's accomplishing his goal. The malach has to be implemented for the goal of the malach. Just like in the Mishkan, when the Chachmei Lev and the Noshim and all the malachas were done for the sake of building the Mishkan, they were done in order to achieve that goal of creating whatever they were creating in the Mishkan. Masha Enkein here, in the case where he's mitzaref and he's not the least bit interested in being mitzaref, he just wants to warm up the mikvah. Here, that's not a meleches machshavos. In a chisaron of meleches machshavas, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that the Isur is only donos. And I want you to know that this shita of the Ri and Tosfos here is very revolutionary. If you take a look at other Rishonim, they don't know this. They believe that according to Rabbi Yehuda, Sai, whether you're talking about Kol Kula, like the Isur of Ketzitzas Baheres, or you talk about the laws of Melech Shabbos, Rabbi Yehuda holds Davar She'enim Miskaven is Asur Min HaTorah. And he denies the P'tur of Meleches Machshavos in Davar She'enim Miskaven. Whereas Tosfos says that even Rabbi Yehuda will agree that Davar She'enim Miskaven has the P'tur, the Chisaron of Meleches Machshavos. Perhaps we could suggest the following. What does Rabbi Yehuda mean when he says that a Davar She'enim Miskaven is Chayiv? That when he cuts off the Baheres, the Tzoras, even though he's not doing it for the sake of cutting off and purifying the Mitzvah, he's doing it for the sake of the Mitzvah Milah, he still is Chayiv. Does Rabbi Yehuda mean A or B? A, that Davar She'enim Miskaven is like a Davar She'enim Miskaven. He knows the repercussions of his actions. He's not motivated. He's not intending to create that. That doesn't move him at all. He doesn't get any benefits from it. And he's not motivated by it, but he certainly knows about it. He knows that when he cuts off the Mila and there's Baheres in the Makom Mila, he's cutting off the Baheres. Don't fool you. Don't let him fool you into thinking that he is totally innocent here. And he's oblivious to reality. He's aware of the reality. No, for us, he's not motivated. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda and he says, I don't care about motivation. What difference does it make why he does this, what his goal is? We don't have to write down a list and enumerate what the possible goals are as far as this individual is concerned. We want to know what he's doing and what he's accomplishing. And if he's violating the Torah law, I don't care what motivated him. Again, if he's a shogeg, he didn't know, that's something different. But here he's amazing. He knows. Well, no. Rabbi Yehuda is saying something else. He admits that kavana and motivation are parts, integral parts of the Avera. But he holds that there is a halacha that it's ke'ilu miskav. It's not that kavanah doesn't play a role. We need kavanah. But if he's aware of the repercussions of his actions, he is carrying a couch, and he knows that because of the soft nature of the earth, he is digging furrows in the ground. That's considered as if he was miskaven. We're going to be mechayev because in the context of his yediyah, of his awareness of the repercussions of his actions, he is responsible for his actions. It's a new din of Davar She'enim Miskaven that his yediyas hamaisa, the totzas hamaisa, is enough to be mechayev. So again, the first approach to Rabbi Yehuda is that kavanah is not an element of the equation. And Enim Miskaven is like Miskaven. The second approach and definition of Rabbi Yehuda is that no, he's chayav, he's an Enim Miskaven, but he's chayav the Torah Enim Miskaven. And there's no equation between Miskaven and Enim Miskaven, even according to Rabbi Yehuda. And then Afkamina is going to be by Shabbos. Why? If you go with the first approach, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, Enim Miskaven equals Miskaven, there's no difference between the two, then he should be chayav in Shabbos. But if you're going to tell me that Enim Miskaven is a new mechayev, and because he is involved in this Maisaber and he's aware of it, he knows what the repercussions are. Whether he's motivated or not, he's chayav because he's aware of his actions, then that's not enough in Hilchos Shabbos. Because in Hilchos Shabbos, the entire essential definition of a malacha is that this malacha is geared towards fulfilling his desire, his machshava, his ratzon. It's motivation that plays the key role. And since Rabbi Yehuda agrees that Eino Miskaven is not like a Miskaven. It's a new category called Eino Miskaven. That Eino Miskaven as a new category has no bearing, according to Tosfos' understanding of Yudah, in the case of Shabbos, where the Torah requires Meleches much. Now, the Mishnah that we're about to embark upon is a continuation of the previous Mishnah Daf Lamed about the 5 tefillos and the double number 10 kiddushim, so that the Kohen Gadol changes his gadim 5 times, back and forth. He switches from his big day Lavan to his big day Zav, back and forth. And every single tevilah, when he changes his gadim, requires 2 kiddushim. Hence, the 5 tefillos require 10 kiddushim, which is kiddush yadayim raglayim in the azara, in the kiyar, and that we know from the previous Mishnah, as we said before. Now, the Mishnah goes into various nuances and details about these tefillos. And we're going to start with the second tevilah. The first tevilah is when he takes off his big day chol in order to prepare for the carbon tamid, which is the first avodah of the day, that's implemented in big day zav. So when he takes off his big day chol and he goes into big day zav, that's called tevilah rishona. Our Mishnah is going to begin by addressing tevilah shniya. In the previous Mishnah, they already addressed tevilah rishona. Now we're up to tevilah shniya, which means he already did the first tevilah. He donned his big day zav. He has now brought the carbon tamid, the tamid shel shachar. He did all the avodos of the morning, and he did the ketores. He did atavos haneros. He was makriv the tamid with the rush, the evarim, the chavitim, the yayin, everything that we discussed. And now he is ready, after completing the hakrovas hatamid and all the avodos of the boker, to don his big day bad, his big day lava, the linen garments, the 4 garments that he needs to implement the special avodos of Yom Kippur. Hevi'u lebeis haparva. For the second tefillah, they bring him to the gag, the roof of a building, a structure, a small structure, which is in the Azar, called the Beis HaParva. On top of the Beis HaParva, on the roof, they built a mikvah. We'll soon see that it was almost magical that they could get the water from the bottom all the way up to the top of the gag of the Beis HaParva and create a mikvah. But that's not for us now. Where is this mikvah on top of the Beis HaParva? But Kodesh Hoysa. It was a chamber, if you want to call it a lishka, that was built in the southern part of the Azara, and it's a Mokum Kadosh endowed with Kedusha. And all this is because the tefillos of Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim must be implemented in a Mokum Kadosh. And this is derived from the Pasuk in Vayikra Tezayin, which we'll read in Mitzvah the Shabbos, V'rachatz es b'saro b'mayim b'makom kadosh. The Torah goes out of its way to describe the tefillah of the Kohen Gadol as b'makom kadosh, and in this case, it means the gag of the Beis HaParva in the southern side of the Azara. Now, the problem here that Tosfos raises, not on this daf, but earlier in the Masechet, daf Lamed Aleph, is that we have a principle that gagos lo niskadoshim, that when they sanctified the Mokum HaMikdash, they omitted the gagos. Now, if that be the case, then since we established that the Beis HaParva had on its roof a mikvah, why is that roof considered b'makom kadosh if gagos lo niskadshim? And Tosfos answers that you're right, a flat roof of a structure in the Mikdash would normally not be Kadosh. But here, this particular Lishka called the Beis HaParva was dug out. It was built in a sort of subterranean Omek HaKarka, such that the Gag, the roof of the Beis HaParva, was exactly Shava. It was on the same exact level as the Ritzvahs HaZorah. So when you build above the Ritzvahs HaZorah in a Gag, then we say Lonis Kadosh. But in a case where the Gag happens to be, how do you say in English, Shava? It's exactly parallel. I don't know what the word would be, but has the same exact height as the Ritzvahs HaZorah. That's not called a Gag. And therefore, when there was a kiddush to the Ritzvahs HaZorah, they were mekadesh every area that is exactly at the same height level as the Ritzvahs HaZorah, including the Lishkas Beis HaParva, which, as we said before, was Shaveh to the Ritzvahs HaZorah. He goes on to tell you what structure was contiguous to the Lishkas HaParva. That's called the Lishkas Hamadichim, where they did the Hadocha and they cleaned out the insides of the offerings. And he says that from the Lishkas Hamadichim, there were steps that led up to the Gag HaParva, Gag Beis HaParva. Okay. All right. If we have time later, I remember learning this whole sugya here about what's called Suchal Azor. You need a Lishka Suchal Azor. This has to do with the status of the Lishkas Hamadichim. Okay, I don't know. We'll leave that for now. Now, the Kohen Gadol is now entering into a mikvah that's at eye level. And that means he's exposed to any spectators who are passing by in the Azara. So therefore, Persu Sodin Shal Butz. Gemara is going to discuss why Butz. And in order to guarantee the tznius here of the Kohen Gadol, who's now going into the mikvah, they put up this sheet that was made of pitchton. Well, again, we'll figure out why. Beino levein ha'am. That would separate the Kohen Gadol from the people who are standing in the Azor. Hidesh Yoda Veraglov, before he's ready for putting on for taking off his big day Zav in order to put on his big day Bad, he does Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. And only afterwards he takes off his big day Zav. And that's the opinion of the Tanakh. Rabbi Meir Omer, no. You got the sequence wrong. But first he was poshet his big day Zav, right? Having concluded his avodas hatomid, etc., in the morning, and then Kiddush es Yada Rag. So he does, according to Rabbi Meir, a Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before he takes off his big day Zav. He's actually wearing his big day Zav at the moment of Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. And you may recall that this was a sugya that we learned back on Daf Lamed Aleph on the base. It's been a while, so we need Chazorah. And the Gemara explains over there that the Tanakama of Rabbi Meir, who disagrees with Rabbi Meir, he holds that Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, which takes place before Tvila, is because of the begadim that he's taking off. And therefore, he does Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, and then, and only then, does he take off his begadim. So again, it's the Machayev here of Tvila and of Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before Tvila is Pshita, is taking off the begadim. And therefore, he's got to be wearing the begadim when he does the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim as a preliminary introduction to the Pshita. Rabbi Meir holds that even the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before Tefillah, as is true for the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim after Tefillah, these are all generated by the begadim she'omed lilbosh li'acharat Tefillah, not by the begadim that he's taking off, but rather by the begadim that he's about to put on. So therefore, based on that sugya, we have two possible machayvim of Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. One is Pshita, and therefore the Kohen Gadol would do the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before he took off his begadim. That's the Shita of Tanakama. And the other machayev that's possibly true is the Levisha, and therefore the Pshita taking off his Gadim, in this case his big days off, should come before Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. That's the Shita of Rabbi Meir. Yorad v'tovel v'olav v'nistapok. So now the Kohen Gadol went into the mikvah. He comes up and he wipes his body to remove all his drops with a beged. And there are many different shitos as to why this is required. There's no such thing as air drying. He has to dry himself with a beged. Some say that's the simplest way of understanding it, to guarantee that there won't be any chatzitza between his body and the big day lavan that he's about to put on, meaning that drops of water would be a chatzitza. A vilo, now the kohanim who are accompanying him will bring him big day lavan, which he needs for the avodas Yom Kippur, those avodos that are unique to Yom Kippur, in which he goes into the Kodesh Kodashim, and if you recall, he has to take off the zav because ein kateger nasa sanegar. However, it's interesting that Chazal offer another explanation as to why he should be wearing big day lavan, which I wanted to mention. It's here in the note. He says that Rachmana chasa al mamonam shel Yisrael. Now, what does this mean? That the Torah is compassionate about the finances of Klal. There's a halacha called gniza, which means that after the Kohen Gadol completes his avodah of Yom Kippurim, he takes his begadim and he has to put them into gniza. No one's allowed to use it. And that reflects the Shita Rabbi Chia that we learned back on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. Now, even according to Rabbi Dosa, who disagrees, he rejects the requirement of gniza, but nevertheless he agrees that you don't use those begadim on the next Yom Kippur. And this has to do with the sugya called Avnei Choshen. So again, the reason why we want to get him to wear big day lavan is that big day lavan, which are the special begadim of Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippurim, are relatively inexpensive, and the Torah had compassion here, and the big day Lavan, which are the Godim of Yom Kippur, they need Gnisa. And the Torah didn't want to have to require Gnisa with big day Zav, that are very expensive. Then the Yalkut Shimoni offers an additional reason. So Levishas big day Zav nira kederech gaiva. The Nemar Mishlech of Hey Altis Hader Lifnei Amelch. So the Kohen Gadol is now going into the Kodesh Kadosh. He should not be wearing what we would call big day gaiva. In other words, I come in with my gold gun, you've seen various uniforms made of gold. These are the big shots. You don't go into the Kodesh Kadosh looking like a big shot. Okay. Lavash v'kidech yadav v'radlov. Now here in this case, even the Chachamim will agree that the second Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim is in a situation where he's wearing his begadim. Because now we're talking about a levisha. The machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Meir was about pshita, meaning the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim that came before the tefillah. And that might be, according to the Chachamim, a machayev of pshita. Whereas Rabbi Meir, right, and Rabbi Meir was the one who came up with the svara of pshita. But even Rabbi Meir would agree that in the case of the second round, the second requirement of Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim, it's the levisha that's machayev. So after he puts on the big day lavan, then he does his second levisha. That's going to everybody. Now the Mishnah wants to know how expensive were the begadim of the Kohen. I'm going to soon see that the monies for this expensive set of begadim were taken from the Lishkas HaTruma, from the communal funds. B'shachar, in the morning, and this means after the second tefillah, he's now going into the Kodesh Kadoshim for the Aktoras HaKtoras, is Hoya Lovesh Plusin. Plusin are big day lavan that are made from a very fine, high quality pishtan. It's not just your run-of-the-mill linen that you buy in a store. It came from a country called Pelusin, wherever that is. And it was imported specifically for the purpose of big day lavan of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, and it cost shel shnei masar money. And that's a massive amount of money, but it gets even more expensive as we go along. Bein Arbayin. Now what's happening is we're fast forwarding to the fourth tefillah, and the Kohen is now going into the Kodesh Kadoshim for Hotzas Kafu Machta. Then he wears Niduyim. He wears big day lavan that are imported, the linen of which is imported from Hinduyim. That's even more expensive than the big day pishtan that he wore earlier. And it's Shmona Me'os Zuz. No. I made a mistake here. But the first round was, it's less expensive, right? Instead of spending 12,000 mana to import this linen from Pelusin, they spent only 800 mana to import this linen from Hinduyim. Divrei Rabbi Meir, Chachamim, they're going to double. Chachamim are going to say that the big day lavan in the morning that were more expensive is b'shachar hayalovesh Shel Shmona Sarmon. It cost 18 mana instead of 12 mana. And Bein Arbayim, when he put on a second set of Big Day Lovon in order to go into the Kodesh Kodashim for Otzas Kafu Machta Shel Shnei Masar Mana Hakol, all the Big Day Lovon in the Kohen Gadol, meaning if you add together A plus B Shel Boker V'Shel Erev, is Shloshim Mana. So you're adding 18 plus 12 is 30. I'm not exactly sure why the Mishnah didn't do that for Rabbi Meir, which would have been 20, and here it's 30. No, he doesn't raise that question. Elu Mishal Tzibur, and where did this massive amount of money come from? In order to buy the linen for the Big Day Lovon, mentioned in our Mishnah, came for the Trumas Halishka, that's called Shal Tzibur, and every year, every individual was chayav in Machzah Shekel, and he was Torem for the entire needs of the Avodah, the Mikdash for the Tzibur, V'imratza Lahosiv. If, let's say, the Kohen Gadol wanted even more beautiful, more chashuv, more yakar, begadim, then Mosif Mishalom. Above and beyond this bare minimum, he would have to shell out from his own pocket. Reminds me of what's going on now that it got hot. So in the base medrash that I daven in the morning, they keep the air conditioning going for X amount of time, and then it goes off automatically. It's very expensive to keep. It's massive, and it remains a little bit cool, but it's not really cool. But at that point, if you want to keep the air conditioning going, you have to shell out from your own pocket. All right, so tomorrow, Mr. Shem, will start here on Daf Lamed Hey and Aleph My Arv, and I wish you a great day.
Mother of the Kohen,
Would what?
she can provide the body for.
She could, if she would, if she wanted, but I don't know that. I think, are you confusing it with the food? You know, the Kohen Gadol's mother would bring food to the Rotzke B'Shogeg with the mikvah. That's not what you're talking about.
Yes, but I thought that she didn't provide